Next up, we have a panel on new market strategies. It's a very broad topic, obviously, and we don't have much time, but just consider today's panel a tasting menu of the buffet of global topics, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper, dive a little bit deeper in our future events. So if I could get our panelists to please come up here, and John is going to moderate for us.
All right. Yeah, let's have everybody in order. Let's do Vinamrata, Porter, Indian, Hai-Ching, Carl. We'll pass the mics between each other. We are on a tight schedule, so I'm glad that we'll get to ask each person a question, at least one. Today's panel discussion on new market strategies is going to focus mostly on kind of really focused questions to each panel member, and then at the end we'll have kind of like one big question that each person answers. But first things first, why don't we have each panel member tell us a little bit about themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Vinamrata, or you can call me V if that's too hard for you to pronounce. I work as a product manager on Google. Currently I work on the Chrome platform team, but earlier I used to work on the Next Billion Users team, which is basically Google's team to build new Google products for emerging markets. And I actually have spent time in 4 countries growing up. I've lived in India, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, and the United States. So that's my background.
Hi, I'm Gale, and currently I run partnerships at Globality, and we're a startup, but we have about 80 employees now. But prior to that, I was the launch VP of Marketing at Virgin America, and I advise about 20 startups too. And it's great to be here.
You all know who I am, but a little bit about my professional background. I started my career as a strategy consultant with the Boston Consulting Group in the Berlin office, and then later on in the Beijing office, and I looped back around to the West Coast to get into clean tech. So I worked in clean tech, in solar and smart grid for a number of years, always doing international expansion or business development, and now am helping build COMPAS, which is a software company that is aiming to automate whatever you can automate about going global and creating a strategy and then helping keep track of how you execute.
Hi everyone, my name is Hai-Ching. I am corporate counsel for Coursera. We're one of the largest online education tech platforms in the world, serving 28 million learners with over 150 plus industry partners and universities. So the area that I handle is that I handle all the deal work for our industry partners. I also do enterprise sales deals with governments around the world and nonprofits, and I do all the privacy compliance work for the company.
Hi, Carl Miller from the Global Retail Insights Network, or membership organization. We have 1,200 retailers across 53 different countries where we get them doing interactive exercises to understand what it means to go global. I'm also the executive producer of the Getting to Global video series, where we interview superstars from all over the world. If you go to gettingglobal.org, you can see our last 3 interviews. One of them was with Michael Evans, who is the president of Alibaba. We have Scott Galloway from L2. We have Kai Lee's international director from Revolve Clothing. I like to coin this series as sort of like Anthony Bourdain meets Casey Neistat meets global commerce. So it's a lot of fun, it's interactive, it's engaging, and you learn something.
All right, well, I now know I need to step up my game. You guys are a pretty amazing group, and we're going to focus mostly on areas such as partnership, growth, buy-in, localization from a product level. And I guess the first question will be for V. I'm glad you said to say V because it's a lot easier. But you know, in your experience with Google, what has been kind of how have you gotten to working on the Next Billion Users within Indonesia, which is where you kind of background working, and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess the way that I would describe the Next Billion Users team is we're essentially building new Google products for emerging markets. And to kind of take a step back and talk a little bit on a higher level about Google's strategy for Next Billion Users, and specifically in Indonesia, it's kind of 3 different components. The first component is we are providing programs and services to help Indonesia achieve its goal of becoming, the largest digital economy in Southeast Asia by 2020. The second component involves making sure that, given that there are constraints for users within Indonesia, specifically around data being very expensive and access to data sometimes being the connections being very spotty, we want to make sure that our existing products work really well for all of our users in Indonesia. And then the third part, which, as I talked about earlier, is building new products. So the first one specifically, we have a bunch of different programs. For example, we have an initiative called Gempura Digital, in which we train small and medium businesses to get online, and we've already had thousands of people sign up for these classes. We've had an initiative around training more Android developers. So there's a lot of really great work happening with the Indonesia local team there. And the second initiative, I'd love to talk about a product called YouTube Go, in which we basically took the entire YouTube experience and built it specifically around the constraints I was talking about with regards to data being really expensive and connection and access being really spotty. YouTube Go gives users the ability to download content and be able to watch it offline. And when you're downloading, it also gives you the option to be able to see how much data you're going to spend in downloading this video. So in that case, it's really taking into account the pain points that users have in using YouTube traditionally and building an experience in which we really try to solve the problems in a meaningful way. And with the third example about building new products is the product I worked on, which is called Google Station, in which we work with local internet service providers and systems integrators to bring public Wi-Fi to emerging markets. And we originally started this product in India, and I was working on the project to help us eventually bring it to Indonesia, where we worked with 2 internet service providers called CBN and Fiberstar. And we just announced a few weeks ago at our annual Google for Indonesia event that we were going to roll out these hotspots, about a few hundred hotspots across the islands of Java and Bali. So that kind of gives you a good overview into, or I hope gives you a good overview into the Google strategy in Indonesia.
Thank you very much for that. And around kind of like going from India to Indonesia, what kind of learnings did you have in terms of understanding how to address each market and where to go next?
Sure. So specifically for Google Station, what I can say is, in terms of where to go next for the product, it kind of depends on the deal flow that comes in. We're a pretty partnership-driven product, so in that sense, it kind of depends on where not only does it make sense from a market opportunity standpoint, but where we have partners that are kind of committed to working on the project. In this case, it just so happened that Google has a lot of vested interest in Indonesia, and also we're just able to find the right set of partners to work with. So that's kind of how the Indonesia deal kind of came through. With regards to your second question in terms of learnings, it's very important for us at Google to kind of build the right set of user experiences. And one thing that we often do is we do a lot of user research. So I personally spent 2 weeks in Indonesia talking to people on the street, talking to people at the sites where they would be using the Wi-Fi, going into people's homes, asking them questions, showing them prototypes. This is a really valuable exercise, especially as a product manager, to really understand what is a pain point your users experiencing and how will they use your product, so you can kind of make the best product decision. And one specific question we had on the product is, oftentimes when you're onboarding to Wi-Fi, you need to provide some sort of personal information, whether it's a phone number or an email address, in order to sign on, and oftentimes it's to comply with regulatory requirements that the government has. And so in Indonesia, the law was a little bit more interesting, and so we were trying to understand, given we wanted to know what are users' ideas around giving this information and what sort of friction will this present in the onboarding flow. And through user research, we were kind of able to come up with an answer. The answer wasn't exactly the same as India because India has different regulatory requirements, and so the experience that users had in India was very different than what they had in Indonesia. Their familiarity with giving up information in order to connect to the Wi-Fi was very different. And so that kind of helped us build the best possible product.
And it's kind of a nice segue into the next question for Porter. Google has, even with all their resources, we know you have to find partnerships and find the right people in market. And not all companies have the resources or the ability or kind of the insight into who the right partners are. And so in your kind of experience, it can be hard to find the right partners. And what have you seen in working with brands and their struggles in finding these partners in the target markets? How was the market process changed? Where's it going?
Yeah, first of all, John, thanks for having me. So what we do, and I'll address how we've been working with clients, but unfortunately, a lot of people, if they go to Google, if they're searching and they're looking for a lawyer, or they're looking for like a certification firm to do kind of, real estate for them or marketing, if they go to Google, they make it all the top agencies, like the big agencies are the ones that have the most SEO optimization. And so what we've been doing is we actually created a platform where we're trying to bring the hidden gems to light across the globe. And so we're operating in 70 countries right now. And we have a technology where we're trying to find the best small and mid-sized providers around the globe so that more people have access to opportunities with large enterprise clients. And so John's firm is actually one of the firms that's on our platform. And this all started because we feel that there is a backlash against globalization that's happening. And so what we're trying to do is bring more opportunities to the small players. And we think that it actually can give better opportunities to big clients because they're getting senior talent like yourself. A lot of people may not be able to find you unless they see an amazing presentation and they start tweeting you. But if someone was sitting in Scandinavia and they wanted to find you as a designer and they put in designer that has a lot of technical experience, maybe they'd get IDEA or they'd get the big firms. So we're trying to surface the best and the brightest of the new talent because there are a lot more firms out there. So it's a combination of redoing the RFP process, and we're reading about 1,000 signals through an RFP and matching people around the globe. So it's been pretty exciting, but just to give you a couple of examples, we had a firm that was a major cosmetic company in Brazil. They wanted to come to the United States and test how their name would translate in this market, and so we helped them find the right naming companies. So that's a good example.
And basically, you're helping with, regardless of what kind of help they need. In this case, it was naming, but also if it's any type of legal or
yeah,
design.
it could be. We have legal, management, consulting, environment. We've got 5 categories that we do right now. It's all premium services. And we vet all of the providers too, so that if we have a client that's coming to us like a major packaged goods company and they need somebody in Russia, we can help them get the right resources.
And has this come about from like your experience at Virgin America, helping with marketing?
Well, actually what happened was my CEO is a gentleman named Joel Hyatt, and some people that were actually in the government wrote a white paper on this, and the question was posed, is there a way to use technology to help create a more global economy? And the government decided they weren't the ones to actually go and implement this business, and so he handed it off to my boss, who had recently sold current TV to Al Jazeera for a nice sum, and so he was looking for his next opportunity. And so we started building the company about 2.5 years ago. We launched in January. We have a bunch of big enterprise clients. So clients are big, the providers are small, but we found that, again, there are more and more of these amazing firms that are spinning off, and that they love it because it's a great new business channel for them, where maybe they couldn't compete against the regular traditional process.
Thank you. And we're kind of looking at this from a couple of different angles, right? We have brands, we have agency, we have software, and that's kind of the next segue into Yin. It's a fairly simple question. How does a company prioritize markets?
Well, the first step is to prioritize markets and not just go about it in a very ad hoc way, which is what happens oftentimes. Especially if you work for a software company these days with SaaS, your product or service is available globally from day one, right? Anyone can access your website, maybe download your product, and we don't have a distinct moment where the management says, okay, I'm going to press this button, and boom, we're going global. And so you get into situations where companies are not really planning for going global, but do so by accident. And they find that there are users all over the world who are downloading their products. They're sending in requests for bugs or particular localizations that they want, even though the product is only advertised and available in English. And so what happens then is the company really struggles to decide, well, where do we go when we have 10 different regions asking us to localize? And what we don't want is for that to become this game of whack-a-mole, or you chase you chase the shiniest things, right, that popped up. And so when we work with customers, we first try to help them define, well, what are the criteria that will determine whether a market is attractive for your company? So say 3, 4, 5 different things that you want to monitor. And then what are the criteria that will help you determine whether you as a company are ready to be successful in that particular market right now? So define those in advance such that whenever an opportunity pops up, you can then sort of plug it into the model, and using your predefined definitions, you can assign a value to it such that at the end you can compare apples to apples. And really that's the only way to prioritize it in a structured way. So of course in our software we also try to make the whole UX very smooth, much nicer than you could ever do in say a spreadsheet, and it's hosted in the cloud so that all of the different people in the company who touch global somehow across all of the layers and all of the functions have access to the latest and greatest. So a lot of what we do is not just bring in structure, but also teach our customer how to change their habits such that global is no longer this isolated event maybe being spoken about between the CEO and the head of sales and business development, but rather that it's a collaborative approach where all of the different functions are involved and they know what the structure is to make these decisions. They see what's coming down the pipeline in our software, which they can access anytime. And this way we avoid these fire drills where we sign this huge client. It's great news because they love our product and service. They want it localized in 25 different languages, but we really don't know how to do that. And so even though we celebrate a huge win, it's a scramble for the rest of the organization.
Nice, thank you. And Hai-Ching, an area that people may not think first about when expanding. You are our legal expert, and kind of wondering what are the types of legal issues that companies consider when approaching emerging markets, or EU markets, both from if they're already in market or they haven't entered a market yet, and some best practices that you've seen used.
Sure. Legal is definitely not the first thing people think of when they expand new markets. I think it really depends on whether you are already not in the market already, or if you're already in there in the market. So if you haven't been in the market, sometimes you're thinking, okay, maybe I should just put all my resources into the market, set up an entity, and then go for it. But many times that might not actually be the right decision for you and your company, depending on your size. Many times, you could consider a much more lightweight situation for a smaller company, like a licensing deal with a local partner versus setting up a full-on entity in the jurisdiction, right? I think that many times that when companies are expanding internationally, they don't realize there's a lot of regulatory restrictions, especially if you are, for example, targeting the EU market. Coursera, we look at we have a lot of customers from the EU, and we have to think about, hey, if we're serious about the EU customer base, we need to make sure that we build privacy in our product already from the ground up. And maybe for a smaller player, they would not have the resources to build in these privacy components. And so maybe the EU is not something that's for you as well, right? Or if you're a younger startup and you want to go into the Chinese market, you don't have robust resources for IP protection, so maybe that might not be a strategy for you as well. And then, so I would say that that's for people who are not yet in the market. For those who have decided, hey, I'm going to commit to, for example, China as a market, and I'm fully in. There's tons of legal regulatory issues. I think from the entity formation standpoint, setting up an entity takes time. There's certain licenses you may need. Depending on what industry that you're in, you may have to do, for example, joint ventures if you're in energy or certain restricted industries. There's certain things, for example, on the IP side, jurisdiction laws in certain jurisdictions in emerging markets may be very different from the US. In China, for example, it's first to file, so it doesn't matter if you have the same trademark elsewhere, but if you're not the first one to file in China, then you lose that right? And so there's also issues with regards to employment issues that people don't realize. When you hire a contractor, many times you think about third-party organization to hire contractors for. Or, maybe you want to send an employee to that jurisdiction, but if the employee stays too long, there may be, you may actually trigger a tax obligation, right? These are things that you would never think of when you think about setting up shop in another country. And lastly, foreign currency issues, right? Like that is a huge thing. I work with emerging markets from China to like Pakistan to like many countries around the world, and that is always a problem when you can't get the money out of the country. And so how do you account for that in contracts? How do you terminate contracts if they're not paying? And how do you go forward and sue, right? So those are all these different things to think about. The best practice that I see are people, like companies that really take a step back and think about what you were saying, like it's your global strategy. And you troubleshoot from there.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting. but it's all good learning of things that people should know, as opposed to saying, when your CEO comes to you and says, hey, we want to enter Japan. Like, there's all kinds of implications where you don't set up an entity, that changes how you do customer service and things like that. So, Hai-Ching, she'll be around later if you have, and I'm sure you do have more questions. And we probably could have a whole session just on a lot of that. So Caro, we're switching gears a little bit. Retailers, when retailers are looking at expanding, typically there's a specific type of product. Has your experience been them looking at it from a product level, or most just kind of going translating it? And what are kind of signals that also help them understand where to enter?
Honestly, everything that's been said here pretty much applies to retailers as well. But I think it's really, panels are usually best when there's some disagreement, but I think we're all reading from the same playbook here, which I heard as, and just to reiterate, is that it's really important that we when we're going into new countries, that we see this as really the complete value chain, right? And so it's not just a product, is my logo the right fit, or does my software, does it look like that's a good fit for that particular consumer base, or I'm currently seeing hits from this particular country, like you're saying it. But it's really, for whether it's compliance or payments or logistics. I think the interesting thing is companies that are really successful out there, what they do is they see that there's the world, and how can whether I'm a new startup, whether I'm an established company, whether I'm a startup within an established company, where's the white space? Where's the white space opportunity? Taking everything into consideration. And what that usually means, and I hate to put this to everybody, but there's something that we all have in common, and that's we all were born somewhere and we all live somewhere. And so essentially what we have is, a lot of times we see companies that are a little bit more laggard in the space, is that everything that is about their global strategies is within the four walls of their company. So all of the thought of what should we do, how should we do it, is within the four walls of their company. And they don't really seek expertise. They don't go out there and your opportunity of walking around Indonesia and literally listening to the customer. Your opportunity of really seeing how to best vet, vendors that might have better local experience and use them as local superheroes. I think that that's what we see in terms of the laggards versus the leaders. So I don't know if I've answered your specific question, but I think that that's really, everything that the panel has said is really spot on, because what we're essentially saying is, it's not as simple as who's coming to your website. It's really such a great opportunity of global growth to really isolate and say, how are we different? How is our value proposition different, and how is that matched to the potential market out there?
I just want to add more from the entrepreneur standpoint. I have advised a lot of entrepreneurs, and a couple of the ones have been amazing to work with. I have noticed that even though we're in Silicon Valley, that they were so savvy at looking at trends that were happening in other markets. So Bobby Lowe, who was at Verb, he was constantly looking at what was happening with WeChat and deep linking, and this other guy, Neil Young, who's a gamer, was really looking at the gaming trends in Asia. And so I think that it's not only about going to another market, but what insights and things can you see that are happening elsewhere that can help make your business more cutting edge, or have something that's very unique in looking at those trends. And so I like your point about really kind of thinking globally and using that to make your business grow.
All very good insight. And sitting on this panel, it kind of makes me realize also that the tools are here. You know, like whether you're looking at using an agency, whether you're trying to find the right people within a company, a software service, all the answers are there. And I just feel like when I talk to a lot of clients, they don't necessarily do enough research or ask the right people to figure out how to find the next market, how to kind of like look at the problem from a different angle. And one last question. I think we're running low on time, but what's one piece of advice you would give for one of these companies or entrepreneurs who are interested in going global?
I guess my advice would be that you have to really do a good job of understanding your user. And I think oftentimes, especially when you're first starting out and building your product, it means going in market, spending time with the user, and really understanding what the problem you're trying to solve is, and making sure that that problem really exists in the market you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my advice to the entrepreneurs sitting here would be really think about who you assemble and put on your team, especially if you're taking in VC money or hiring people that have good experience that can help you make the right decisions, and don't try to grow too quickly, and really think about it in a logical process.
I would say humility. Assume that you don't know everything. Even though I do global every day with tons of different companies, there's still a ton that I'm not an expert in. And so going forward, you can join our LinkedIn community and attend more events and meet more people of our, I'll just call it the Global Sake tribe, so that you can get exposed to the folks who kind of complement all of your skill sets.
I would say really understanding your customer expectations. The reason why I say this is because many times you can sign a contract with another player in an emerging market, but they may not have the same understanding of the contract or the actual, what they expect from the relationship. So really managing customer expectations and communicating that is very important.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what we call the local superheroes, which are those people that really understand in market stuff. But then the one that I'll add to that is sit down with your executives, let them know this is not about ROI, it's not about a business plan, and start to use common language with them where they really understand this is about iterative learning and discovery when they're going to a new market. So, hey, we're going through a discovery process in China. We're not going to big freaking China to get this amount of ROI. No, we need to learn. This is what we're doing. This is the process that we're using. And it's all about setting their expectations early so that they don't come down on you later and say, hey, I thought we were going to China to make $1 billion. No, it's not about that. It's about the learning.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on this panel. And we'll have networking afterwards also.